Augusttown, Chapter 11. One morning back then, in 1920, a little before the whole flying thing had started, a young and barely pubescent Jilzine was getting ready to step out of the house, wearing her schoolgirl's uniform of a khaki skirt and white blouse. Her guardian, Miss Lou, looked the child up and down, her gaze lingering especially on the now orange-sized mounds jutting out from what had only recently been the flat plank of the child's chest. She frowned. The child's body was maturing. "Look here, Pickney," Miss Lou said, her arms now akimbo. "I see, dear, that you're getting to a certain age." Her gaze was still firmly fixed on the child's breasts, and she made this, her gaze, do the explaining of what the particular age in question was. "But make I tell you something," Miss Lou continued. "If you ever so force ripe to come home with belly, me I go cut it right out and make you myself, and you could have bleed to death for all I care." Jilzine turned a confused face towards Miss Lou. The young girl's rectangular eyes tried but failed to grow past their natural geometry into wide circles. "Ma'am?" she asked, and it was only then, at this simple question, that Miss Lou took a good look at her ward, not just at her growing breasts, but at everything else, and it dawned on her in quite a profound way that this speech she had just given was unnecessary. The child who stood before her was ugly. Spectacularly so. How had she not noticed this before? If anything was going to protect the girl's virginity, her looks would. Miss Lou was suddenly moved with an incredible pity for the child, who she would henceforth refer to in conversations as the poor wretched soul. She reached out and held Jilzine's hand. "No mind me, darling. Go on school and study your book like a good girl. Yes, man. Go on." And she ushered Jilzine out into the street. Miss Lou watched the figure of the little girl disappear down the road. She tutted to herself once more. That one not pretty at all, at all, at all. She descend from me, yes, but them looks where she got is not mine's, not from my family." Miss Lou was not Jilzine's mother, nor was she the child's grandmother. The more typical family arrangement, grandparents raising their grandchildren. In fact, Miss Lou was Jilzine's great-grandmother. What was especially unusual was the youthful age of Miss Lou. At the time of Jilzine's birth, she was still a few months shy of her 50th. To be a great-grandmother at the age of 49 required, for many, a fair bit of head-scratching, but all the addition and subtraction led each budding mathematician of Augusttown to the inevitable conclusion that Jilzine was the latest in a line of women from whom nothing good could come. Women who were drawn from an early age, and in a self-destructive way, to men. Women of whom it was widely whispered, "Them so much as look pan cocky, even when it lie down dead in a man's trousers, and bam, them get belly just so." When Miss Lou entered her 60s, she went willingly to an event no one could have convinced her to go to before, an open-air crusade, and she made an appropriate spectacle of herself, cowballing her way down the aisle to the repentance corner. Her baptism 1 week later in the waters of the Mona River sealed the deal. She had found religion. Now she was determined to transform herself into a proper and dignified old lady, as befitted her age. She began to sit in the sun every day, willing her still black hair to start graying. She also began to affect the stooped walk of someone stricken with arthritis. She was determined to raise her now pubescent granddaughter, great-granddaughter, in a different way than the other women of her family had been raised. And so the hypocritical harangue with which she had lambasted Jilzine that morning had been rehearsed for weeks before it was finally delivered. But long before Miss Lou had recognized her great-granddaughter's ugliness, Gilzine had been aware of it herself. It had been pointed out to her by her fellow students, by teachers, and even by complete strangers on the road. And this pointing out had never been done in a cruel or malicious way, but rather as a simple matter of observation, or as an easy way to differentiate her from others. "Ugly gal," vendors might call to her, or school acquaintances who either didn't know or had forgotten her name. So Gilzine understood her ugliness in much the way that she understood that Tuesday followed Monday, or that 1 + 1 = 2. That is to say, she knew it as a simple and shruggable fact. She did not feel down about her ugliness, or indeed that ugliness was aesthetically inferior to beauty. But if Gilzine lacked anything in looks, she made up for it with talent. Each evening, Miss Lou would present her niece to Gilzine, the niece which she had convinced herself had suddenly been stricken with arthritis, and she would ask the young girl to rub them down with bay rum. As the girl performed this nightly duty, the Augustown evening now smelling of menthol and pimento, Miss Lou would inevitably instruct the girl further. "Sing something for me now." And Gilzine, who would have anticipated this instruction all day, would sing whatever little song she had been secretly practicing. A jammer, a shay, a Sunday school chorus, a folk song they both knew, or even a little tune she had made up herself. Her voice was not typical. Hers was not the rich alto one might expect from a churchified young woman in Augustown, not that gruffly textured sound that had in it the feel of planting cane or walking long distances, and that had at its center a kind of brokenness, which was where all its power sprang from. No, that was not Gilzine. There was something rather bird-like about her voice. It was clean and sweet soprano that would seem delicate at first, but which could rise to a power which would always take you by surprise. Though she made no conscious attempt to hide her gift, it remained something of a secret for quite some time, known only to Miss Lou and the neighbors, Mas Bilby, Miss Nora, and their little girl Irene, who, whenever they heard Gilzine sing, would open the windows wide as if to let in the night air. Little wonder, then, that on the 31st of December 1920, it was Sister Gilzine who began to sing the preacher man up towards the clouds. Back on her veranda, 62 years into the future, Ma Taffy is stretching her mind to remember it all. She tells Kaya the final portion of the story like this. "So the Christmas we never care about come and go, and then the day we was really waiting on come last. And I swear it's like a breeze did come down that morning and sweep through Augustown and replace the smell of shit with something sweeter, like morning dew. It was just a little girl, a little beany thing, but I was among being people who did find again that thing that made them people, and them ones that my Aunt Matilda did tell us about, the old ones who used to be slave people. Well, they was there too, come now to see a true flying African, and they say how glad they was that they managed to live to see a day like this. When Master Bedward come out, I feel something big trying to rise out of my little body, and I think everybody was feeling it too, like we never had so much love for anything before. He was just so big and black and beautiful in them shining white robe, white as if them did wash in the cleanest river. The deacons led him over to the big seaman tree that I believe is still there, and then they let him go. Bedward allow himself a float up to the tallest branch, and then he hold on and smile down like he was proud of all away. The farmer circle round the tree, making space so the old people and the little ones like me could come up in front and see. No one was saying anything or making a sound. There was just that thing happening in each of our hearts, like it was breaking and healing and breaking and healing. And then, still without making a sound, a sister wheel into the middle of the circle, and she turn and she dip, and then she look up at bedward, and she bow deep, and then wheel back out, and then all the women was doing it. Me mother Nara and Aunt Matilda, all of them wheeling and bowing, but quiet, without grunting or trumping or speaking in tongues. And Bedward, he was just nodding and smiling at everybody. This go on for a while. Nobody did feel impatient. It feel like this was something we had waited on for so long. It was okay just to sit down and consider it. I hear them before I did even see them. Babylon boys. Maybe 100 of them, with their black boot and the baton and their long rifle, marching up to Union camp like they're coming to fight war. And all it was the sound of them boots and the stones, but it was so loud, and that is when the day start to spoil. The governor himself was there too, a red piggish face man in front of all of them, walking there in the sun hot, but not busting a sweat. And when I look at him, I feel I was looking at a corpse. The old people especially was nervous. One woman started to cry. This always happen. Always happen. That's why I tell you I never want to come, 'cause this always happen. Some people tried to hush her up, but she wouldn't stop. And suddenly we was breaking up, like we wasn't people together no more. I know I was just a little girl, but I tell you, Kaya, I could feel us moving away from each other. And even Master Bedward up there in the seaman tree, there was a cloud moving across him face, and he wasn't looking so easy like he was looking before. The Babylon boys wasn't doing much, just looking at us hard and mean and walking through the crowds, slapping them baton into the palm of them hand, making us feel like we was trapped. Maybe that was when Bedward decided in his mind it was now or never. The stupid old woman was blabbering still, and the Babylon boys was beating them stick. So he had to shout out strong over the crowd one single word: "Behold!" Everybody quiet same time. We all look back to the seaman tree. Then just like that, Bedward let go of the branch he was holding. He stepped away from the seaman trees straight out into the middle of the air. We hold with breath. Everybody shocked. Even we who did know all along this ability to fly without feathers. He not holding on to no branch. He not standing on anything at all. But he still up there floating. You could tell the Babylon boys was nervous now. And the governor man who did look like a corpse before was now sweating, and finally he looked to me like somebody with blood running through him vein. I think to myself, never in him born days he expect to see nothing like this. But let me tell you something now about miracles. People get used to them real quick. The same thing that could cause your mouth to drop open 1 minute is the same thing you could take as normal the next minute. So we wait and we wait, but nothing else was happening. Bedward floating there in the middle of the air, not falling, but not rising either. He just staying in the same place. Even him seem like him don't understand. He start to scratch his head. The Babylon boy start to snicker. And then they start to laugh hearty, as if it's every day you see a man floating in the middle here, as if nothing so special in all of this. One of them shout out, "That's it, only that, one circus trick," and he laugh and slap his thigh. Bedward frowning now, and when you look real close you see that he was starting to fall, little by little, coming back to earth. That's when Sister Gilzine come in. She who you only know now as a old woman losing her mind. Back then she was just a girl as well, little older than me, yes, but not a grown woman yet. Still she was the one who take matters into hand. She tell us later that all of a sudden she did remember the story of how Peter did step out onto the waves to meet the Savior, and how when he start to lose faith, he did start to sink. Sister Gilzine get an understanding from this. We was losing faith. That was the problem. Even Bedward was losing faith, and we had to build it back up fast. Even in the face of Babylon, we had to build back up our faith. She run into the middle of the circle, stand up right under Bedward, who coming down more steadily, and she close her eyes tight, lift up the palm of her hand like her faith alone could push him back into the sky. And she raised a chorus with a beautiful discount fewer people did even know she had inside her. She sing, "Fly away home to Zion, fly away home, over and over. Fly away home to Zion, fly away home." And now everybody get the understanding that Gilzine did get. A man cannot rise on his own. Not even a powerful man like Alexander Bedward. Him did need us. Him did need August Stone. It was we who had to push him up into the sky. It was we who had to show our faith to the governor and everybody else. So now all of us joining on this song. All of us raising our hands and praying. All of us hoping and believing and being people together again. All of us singing, "Fly away home to Zion, fly away home." He start to rise again, steadily, steadily rising. Babylon get quiet all at once. Babylon don't have no more laugh to laugh. Babylon confounded. And now the governor man who been quiet the whole time find his voice to shout, "Get him down! Get him down!" But none of us pay him no mind. We wasn't going to let Babylon divide us again. We keep our eyes on the Master and our voices on the song. That is why we never see when one of them boys did run off. And we never see when him come back with a long hookah stick that people used to pick breadfruit or hockey from the tallest branch. This fellow run into the middle of the circle, and just before Master could reach to a height so high as to escape the trapments of the world, that is when this fellow reach up with him long stick and hook Bedward by the neck of his robe. Catch him like him was just a ripe fruit up there to be picked. They yank the stick hard and pull the preacher man right back down. Ma Taffy turns her head once again to the scarred mountain. This story that she is telling was meant as a sort of distraction, to take her mind off what she does not want to know, and yet it has led her right back to the present day. A fruit waiting to be picked, she thinks. The smell of jackfruit, she thinks. The present stench of the day. She thinks also about how each person has a soul, and how these two are fruits that ripen every day, drawing ever closer to their harvest. and then a whole new thought. She wonders if this awful day has something to do with her own death. Perhaps, but no. If it is her own death that is to come, she wouldn't be worrying so much. That would hardly be a calamity. She places her hand again on the butchered dome of Kaya's head. She rests it there, hoping perhaps that he will feel something of her love towards him. "The story of Bedward," she says, "is not the one they've been telling you. Is not the story of some fool man who get it into him head that him could fly. And neither is it the story of a clumsy Baffin man who fall out of a tree. You hearing me, child? The story of Bedward is something completely different. Is the story of a man who tries best to do something big and to reach higher than any we did think a man like him could ever reach." The old woman pauses. She suddenly doubts the earnestness that has crept into her voice and shrugs. "Then again," she continues, "it's probably just the everyday story of this goddamn island. Just another striving man that this blasted country decide to pull down." 17 degrees north, 76 degrees west. Down there in Augustown, it sits between two hillsides, and one of these carries on its face a scar. And when these two hills throw their shadow over the valley, it can feel as if it is the dark shadow of history. Here then is the boring bit, the actual history, as it were, the things that have been recorded in official sources. History tells us that there was once a man by the name of H.E.S. Woods, an African American who somehow ended up in Jamaica and who was more commonly called Shakespeare. The S of his initials may or may not have stood for Shakespeare. The records do not say. And that this man, Shakespeare, was quite a peculiar man who lived in caves between Spanish Town and the parish of St. David's, which no longer exists. And that one day in 1888, this man, Shakespeare, journeyed from St. David's to Augustown and prophesied a great and terrible prophecy. "Behold," Shakespeare said, as if he had arrived in Augustown straight from the Old Testament, "the sins of Augustown have come up before me, and I will destroy this place as I did Dallas Castle, except the people repent. Ye, if they will come together, take their white cups and hold to me a fast, I will not destroy them. But if they will not repent and obey me, I will sink the valley and make the two hills meet." And so the people of Augustown repented, and Shakespeare made another prophecy, that a man even greater than he would rise up from the ignoble valley, that valley which from the sky looks like a great big pot of cornmeal porridge, and that this man would lead a great religion, and it would be a blessing unto millions. History says that at the time of this prophecy, Alexander Bedward was a man of little distinction, that he was a cow herder on the nearby Mona estate, and a gambler and an adulterer to boot. He had been afflicted with an unknown disease for many years, and woke up each morning with a high fever, his broad forehead drenched with sweat, and his insides feeling as if they were being turned inside out. And on such mornings he would hold his great big head in his calloused hands and bawl out, "Oh Lord! Oh Lord! Why the rascal this here sickness won't leave me be?" And then he would stumble into the yard near to his fowl coop, and vomit until the lining of his stomach had torn, and all that he was bringing up was blood. History says that the doctors were of no help to him, and so he finally resolved, in the delirium of one of his fevers, to leave his wife, his girlfriends, and his 7 children and migrate. that he took up residence in Colon, where he worked as a laborer, and that there he suddenly enjoyed perfect health. He woke up each morning and chewed tobacco leaves, and smiled to himself and whispered, "Foreign life good no fuck." Then, after 2 years, he decided to visit Jamaica, with a thick gold chain round his neck. He walked into Augustown with 2 packed suitcases in his callous hands, but before reaching home, he leaned the luggage against the door of a rum bar, and there he sat, well into the night, buying quart after quart of white rum, so that everyone was drunk from his charity, and by the end of that night, he had spent a good deal of the money he had brought back for his wife, his girlfriends, and his 7 children. History records that he stumbled home at last, stinking of rum, and climbed into bed beside his wife, and before she could raise her voice against him, he put his hand against her mouth and pushed himself into her. That the next morning he woke up and felt a sickness that was more than just a hangover. It was the old disease come back, and he woke up groaning, "Rasclat! Rasclat!" and stumbled out of the foul coop, where he vomited until he saw blood. That he fainted into the mesh of the coop, scraping his face, and stayed there for hours among the feathers and the bird shit and his own vomit. That the disease refused to leave, and so he took what strength he could muster and ran away from Jamaica again. History says that this time the disease followed him, that he was constantly delirious, that he dreamed he would die there in Panama, but that in one of his most vivid dreams he saw an old man coming out of a cave with a whip, a very peculiar man, who instructed him to return at once to Augustown. That Bedward began to cry and complain that he could not go back. He could not. He could not. "Me nah go back to that rascal place." But the old man flicked the whip on Bedward's back, a scoring he wore for the rest of his life. And then the man with the whip told him who he should go to and ask for money. History records that Bedward procrastinated, that the fever grew worse, that the man with the whip came to him a second time in his dream, that Bedward finally obeyed, that he got the money and returned to Jamaica, and there, back on the island, he gave himself over to fasting and praying, that he cried in his wife's lap and repented, and that in the years to come he became the greatest preacher man in Jamaica. Bedwardism became one of the most important religions across the island, and for 30 years people came from all around the Caribbean to Augustown to hear this man preach. He famously said, "There is a white wall and a black wall, but the black wall is growing bigger and will crush the white wall." He was dearly loved by the black peasants of the island, but was sorely hated by the governor and the upper-class rascals, who were mostly white and who worried over his stirring oratory and the crowds he inspired. History says that he gave himself many titles. It is likely that he began as Brother Alex, but he soon became the Shepherd and Dispenser. He was the Earl of Augustown. He was also Lord Bedward, but mostly he was Master Bedward. History tells us that one day, this one-time cowherder, former gambler and adulterer, now turned preacher man, announced his intention to fly. He declared he was going to heaven, to gather bolts of lightning in his callous hands, and he would bring them back down with him to that island where he would smite the white wall, the white upper-class rascals who, even though slavery had ended, were still oppressing the poor black folk. From every parish in the island, and also from overseas, from Panama and from Cuba, people came. They journeyed to Augustown to see this great thing happen, and the governor was gravely worried. A group of high-powered men went into the governor's office and slammed their red fists on his lignum vitae desk and told him, "This cannot happen! This must not happen!" And so, on the day that Bedward was supposed to fly, The police came and arrested him. He was locked up in the madhouse, Bellevue Hospital, and he remained there for the balance of his life. History says his followers were broken by this, that the 10 years in which the preacher man withered away in jail were like years in the wilderness, but that his second in command, a fellow by the name of Robert Hines, whose story is not told enough on the island, joined forces with another man, Leonard Howell. Bedward's teachings were gathered up by these two men, mixed in with the teachings of Marcus Garvey, and published in a little book called The Promised Key, under the pseudonym G.G. Maraj. And you can buy this little book even today. And this book is widely regarded as the first book of Rastafari. You might stop to consider this, that when these dreadlocked men and women, when these children of Zion, when these smokers of weed and these singers of reggae, when they chant songs such as If I Had the Wings of a Dove or I'll Fly Away to Zion, these songs hold within them the memory of Bedward. Such songs, sung at the right moment, can lift a man or woman all the way up to heaven. Call it what you will, history or just another old-time story, there really was a time in Jamaica, 1920 to be precise, when a great thing was about to happen but did not happen. Though people across the length and breadth of the island believed it was going to happen, though they desperately needed it to happen, it did not. But the story as it is recorded, and as it is still whispered today, is only one version. It is a story as told by people like William Grant Stanley, by journalists, by governors, by people who sat on wide verandas overlooking the city, by people who were determined that the great thing should not happen. Look, this isn't magic realism. This is not another story about superstitious island people and their primitive beliefs. No, you don't get off that easy. This is a story about people as real as you are, and as real as I once was before I became a bodiless thing floating up here in the sky. You may as well stop to consider a more urgent question, not whether you believe in this story or not, but whether this story is about the kinds of people you have never taken the time to believe in. End of chapter 11.